The mist clings to the valleys of the East African Rift, a white shroud covering a world that is slowly dying. It is the dawn of the Pliocene epoch, 4,800,000 years before the present era. The sun rises over a landscape that still remembers the deep, unbroken slumber of the jungle, but the air carries a new, chilling dryness. This is not the vibrant, eternal Eden it appears to be. It is a kingdom under siege by invisible forces. The tectonic plates beneath the earth are shifting, buckling the crust and altering the flow of the winds, stealing the moisture that feeds the great canopy. In this ancient theater of green, the definition of survival is written in the language of calories and sugar. The dense rainforests, once a continuous blanket stretching across the continent, are beginning to fray at the edges, tearing apart into isolated islands of vegetation. Inside these shrinking sanctuaries, life clings to the old ways with desperate stubbornness. The profound silence of the morning is broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant haunting call of a colobus monkey. This is a vertical world, a three-dimensional maze where the ground is a foreign, terrifying abyss that belongs to the nightmares of the night. High within the interwoven branches, a small troop of hominids stirs from their sleeping nests, their bodies curled tight against the damp chill. They are not yet human, nor are they simply apes. They are something in between, creatures of the twilight boundary. Their existence is entirely defined by the geography of the trees, their limbs adapted for grasping and swinging, their bones light and agile. They possess a mental map of the forest that is more detailed than any chart, a neural network of routes, safe havens, and most importantly, the location of the ripening fruit trees that sustain their burning metabolisms. The diet of these early ancestors is a narrow, specialized regime that demands a constant intake of soft, ripe fruits. Their teeth are coated with thin enamel, suitable for crushing pulp and peeling skins, but ill-equipped for the grinding of tough fibers or the cracking of hard nuts. They are slaves to the sugar of the fig and the fleshy berries that hang like jewels in the upper canopy. Every waking hour is a relentless calculation of energy expenditure versus caloric gain. To move is to burn fuel. To eat is to replenish it. In a world of abundance, this equation is simple, but the abundance is fading. As the global temperature drops, the great hydrological cycle slows and the rains become less predictable, causing the fruit-bearing trees to synchronize their cycles or fail altogether. The troop moves with a frantic energy today, their dark eyes scanning the leaves for the flash of color that signals food. The matriarch, a scarred female with patches of gray in her fur, leads the way along a familiar branch highway, but the route is changing. The gap between the trees, once a simple reach, has widened into a leap that requires a moment of hesitation. The forest is pulling apart, mirroring the fragmentation of their food sources. They arrive at a grove of wild fig trees, a location that has sustained their lineage for generations, only to find the branches stripped bare. The competition for these dwindling resources is fierce. Birds, monkeys, and squirrels have stripped the harvest before the sun hit the zenith. The hominids pick through the remnants, finding only unripe, hard green fruits that resist their chewing. They gnaw at the tough skins, their jaws aching, the bitter taste of tannins flooding their mouths. This is the taste of the new era, a flavor of resistance and scarcity that replaces the sweet, easy nectar of the past. Hunger is a physical weight that drags at their limbs, making every movement through the canopy more dangerous. Without the quick energy of sugar, their blood glucose drops, clouding their judgment and slowing their reflexes. A young male reaches for a distant branch, his grip failing for a split second, sending a shower of leaves and bark tumbling down to the forest floor. He catches himself hard, hammering against his ribs, staring down into the shadows below. Down there, 70 feet below, lies the domain of the saber-toothed cats and the crushing jaws of the hyenas, monsters that wait for gravity to deliver their dinner. The physiological demand for high-quality food binds them to this shrinking habitat, creating a prisoner's dilemma. To stay in the familiar territory is to starve slowly as the trees die. To leave is to face the unknown terrors of the open ground. Their digestive systems are not yet evolved to process the grasses or the tubers that grow in the expanding savannas. They are biological specialists in a world that is rapidly favoring the generalist. They need the soft, the sweet, and the easy. But the planet is becoming hard, bitter, and difficult. The tension in the troop is palpable, manifesting in quiet whimpers and aggressive shoving matches over a handful of berries. The afternoon sky begins to bruise with the color of slate, signaling the approach of a violent equatorial storm. The wind picks up, whistling through the gaps in the canopy, transforming the rhythmic swaying of the trees into a chaotic, violent thrashing. The hominids huddle together near the trunk of a massive hardwood, anchoring themselves with hands and feet, their fur bristling against the drop in pressure. These storms are becoming more frequent and more intense, another symptom of the destabilizing climate that is rewriting the rules of their existence. The smell of ozone and crushed vegetation fills the air, overpowering the scent of rot and musk. Rain hits the canopy like a barrage of stones, shattering the leaves and turning the bark into a slick, treacherous surface. The noise is deafening, a roar of water that drowns out the calls of the troop members, isolating them in their own pockets of fear. Water streams down their faces, blinding them while the temperature plummets. In this chaos, the fragility of their arboreal lifestyle is exposed. They are safe from the predators on the ground, but they are at the mercy of the structural integrity of the forest itself. The wind screams, tearing dead branches from their sockets and hurling them into the void. Suddenly, a crack echoes through the forest, louder than the thunder, the sound of living wood snapping under unbearable torque. The massive limb that served as the primary bridge to the northern feeding grounds shears away from the trunk. It falls in slow motion, crashing through the layers of vegetation below, taking with it the vine highways and the safety routes that the troop has memorized since birth. The path forward is gone. The troop stares at the jagged stump, the white wood gleaming like a bone in the rain. They are cut off, stranded on an island of trees that is suddenly much smaller than it was an hour ago. As the storm passes and the rain slows to a drip, a heavy silence descends upon the forest, amplifying the sound of their ragged breathing. The sun begins to set, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch across the gaps in the trees. The matriarch looks across the divide to the trees on the other side, where the fruit still hangs visible but unreachable. The distance is too great for even the strongest jumper. The physics of their world have changed. The continuous lattice of the jungle has been broken by the violence of the weather, forcing a decision that evolution has delayed for millennia. Night falls, bringing with it the cold and the terrifying sounds of the predator guild waking up on the forest floor. The troop does not sleep. They cling to the wet branches, their stomachs twisting with empty cramps. The metabolic cost of the storm and the lack of food has pushed them to a critical threshold. If they do not eat tomorrow, they will become too weak to climb, and falling is a death sentence. The survival diet is no longer about selection. It is about accessing any calorie source available, regardless of the risk involved. The equation has shifted. The danger of the ground is now equal to the danger of starvation. Morning brings a pale, washed-out light that reveals the full extent of the damage. The storm has not only broken the bridge, it has flattened the surrounding saplings, creating a clear, unobstructed view of the muddy floor. From their high perch, the ground looks alien, a flat brown expanse littered with debris. The hominids peer down, their eyes wide, processing the depth. They have touched the ground before briefly to cross small gaps, but they have never been forced to travel across it. It is a biological taboo, a violation of their vertical heritage. The matriarch moves first, driven by the biological imperative to feed the infant clinging to her chest. She descends the trunk slowly, her movements awkward and hesitant. Her anatomy is designed for pulling and hanging, not for the compression of downward climbing. Her feet, with their divergent big toes, struggle to find purchase on the wet bark. The rest of the troop watches in paralyzed silence, witnessing a transgression of the natural order. She pauses 10 feet above the ground, the smell of wet earth and fungus filling her nostrils, a scent distinct from the clean air of the canopy. She drops the last few feet, landing on all fours in the soft mud. The impact vibrates through her bones, a sensation entirely unlike the springy recoil of a branch. She stands up, rising to her full short height, wobbling slightly on legs that have never borne her full weight for long. The tall grass towers over her head, blocking her vision, creating a wall of green that could hide anything. She is instantly blind to the world around her, stripped of the panoramic security of the trees. She makes a low guttural sound, a signal to the others. One by one the others descend, driven by the hive mind of the group and the undeniable urge of hunger. They land awkwardly, their knuckles grazing the soil, their eyes darting frantically in all directions. They huddle together, a small, vulnerable knot of fur against the vast scale of the forest floor. The grand three-dimensional world of the canopy is gone, replaced by a flat, dangerous plain where death can come from any direction. They are no longer masters of their domain. They are refugees in a hostile land. The diet of soft fruits is now separated from them by miles of open ground. To survive, they must move. They must walk. The matriarch takes the first step, pushing through the wet ferns, her gait a rolling, inefficient shuffle. She picks up a fallen fruit rotting in the mud covered in grit and ants. She wipes it briefly and bites into it, the sand grinding against her teeth. It is a meager, dirty meal, but it provides the spark of energy needed to continue. This is the first meal of the new epoch. They move forward, leaving the sanctuary of the mother tree behind. The canopy above, once their roof and their floor, is now just the sky. The wind blows through the undergrowth, carrying the scent of drying grass and distant dust. The garden is waning, the doors to Eden are closing, and the long, treacherous march toward the horizon has begun. They are small, terrified, and hungry, walking away from the only home they have ever known into the blinding light of a drying world. The transition from the shadowed cathedral of the rainforest to the exposed theater of the savanna mosaic is not gradual. It is a violent assault on the senses. As the troop leaves the damp soil of the receding jungle, they step into a wall of blinding, unfiltered solar radiation. The canopy, which had served as a natural parasol for millions of years, is gone, replaced by a relentless blue void that stretches infinitely upward. The air here is thin and dry, sucking the moisture from their nasal passages and cracking their lips. The light bounces off the yellow grass and the bleached soil, creating a shimmering haze that distorts the horizon and confuses the depth perception of eyes evolved for the twilight gloom. The ground beneath their feet changes texture, shifting from soft, decomposing leaf litter to hard-baked earth and abrasive gravel. Every step is a sensory shock, the uneven terrain bruising the soles of feet that still retain the curvature of climbers. The grass, sharp as flint, slashes at their ankles and shins, leaving thin lines of blood that draw the attention of persistent, buzzing flies. This is the savanna mosaic, a patchwork landscape of open woodland scrub and vast stretches of grassland that represents the new frontier of their existence. It is a land of extremes, where the temperature swings violently between the roasting noon and the freezing midnight, testing the thermal limits of their biology. Locomotion becomes the primary struggle of this new epoch. The hominids are facultative bipeds, capable of walking on two legs, but not yet masters of the art. Their gait is a rolling, inefficient waddle, their hips swinging wide to compensate for a center of gravity that has not yet fully stabilized. To walk upright is an act of continuous defiance against gravity, a controlled fall that requires constant muscular adjustments. Their knees knock together and their arched spines ache under the compression of the vertical posture. Yet this awkward stance is the key to their survival in the solar furnace. By standing upright, they reduce the surface area of their bodies exposed to the direct overhead sun, a crucial physiological adaptation that prevents their brains from overheating. While the bipedal stance spares them from the worst of the solar radiation, it exposes them to the vastness of the landscape. Standing on two legs lifts their eyes above the waist-high grass, granting them a surveillance platform that no quadruped possesses. For the first time, they can see the enemy before the enemy smells them. They scan the horizon, their brains struggling to process visual data. At this scale, the herds of ancestral wildebeest, moving like a dark river in the distance, the circling vultures marking the location of death. This new perspective brings knowledge, but it also brings a crushing sense of vulnerability. They are tiny vertical markers in a flat world visible for miles to any creature with an appetite. The search for food in this alien landscape forces a radical expansion of their dietary definition. The sweet, energy-dense fruits of the forest are absent here, replaced by a scattered, hidden menu that requires cognitive effort to unlock. The troop fans out, moving slowly through the scrub, overturning rocks and pulling at rotting logs. They are no longer specialists. They are becoming generalists by necessity. A female spots a movement in the dry leaves, a large armored lizard sluggish in the morning chill. With a quick, desperate lunge, she pins it, ignoring the creature's thrashing tail. She bites into the raw, scaly flesh, the crunch of bone and gristle echoing in her skull. This is the beginning of the broad-spectrum diet, a survival strategy that views everything as potential fuel. They consume termites, scooping them from broken mounds, with their fingers tolerating the stinging bites for the burst of protein and fat. They chew on the seeds of grasses, their teeth grinding against the silica-rich husks, wearing down the enamel that was designed for soft figs. They dig for shallow roots, tasting the bitterness of earth and starch. It is a diet of low returns, requiring them to eat almost constantly to maintain their energy levels. The pleasure of eating is gone, replaced by the grinding, monotonous mechanics of fueling a machine. Water becomes the tyrant that dictates their movement. In the rainforest, hydration was absorbed through succulent plants and trapped rainwater. Here it must be sought out. The heat accelerates their dehydration, thickening their blood and making their movements sluggish. They track the flight paths of birds and the trails of larger animals, reading the signs of the land to find a muddy watering hole. When they find it, the water is stagnant and brown, fouled by the waste of 100 other species. They drink quickly, fearfully, knowing that the water's edge is the preferred dining table of the ambush predator. The liquid is warm and gritty, but it revives their cells, allowing the march to continue. As the sun climbs to its zenith, the savanna falls silent, the heat becoming a physical weight that presses down on the land. Most animals retreat to the shade of the acacia trees, but the hominids must keep moving. Their lack of speed means they cannot afford to stop. They must cover ground to find enough scattered calories to survive the night. They walk in a loose formation, the adults forming a protective perimeter around the young. The bonds of the troop are tested here. There is no energy for social grooming or play. Every interaction is functional, a grunt or a gesture to maintain cohesion in the blinding glare. They are a single organism moving across the anvil of the earth. The psychological impact of the open ground begins to reshape their minds. In the trees, danger was vertical, a fall or a climbing snake. Here, danger is horizontal and omnipresent. The wind carries the scent of dry grass, dust, and something else, a musky, urine-tinged odor that triggers a primal alarm in the reptilian brainstem. They stop sniffing the air, their nostrils flaring. The wind shifts, confusing the signal. The grass to their left ripples not with the wind but against it. The pattern of the swaying stalks is wrong. The matriarch freezes, rising to her full height, her eyes locking onto a patch of shadow that seems to be solidifying. Out of the golden camouflage steps a nightmare of the epoch, a Dinophilis, the terrible cat. It is not as large as the lions of the future, but it is built for power, with stout forelimbs, designed to wrestle prey to the ground, and elongated canine teeth capable of piercing a skull. It moves with a terrifying liquid silence, its belly brushing the grass, its yellow eyes fixed on the smallest member of the troop. It does not roar. It does not need to. The silence of the predator is more terrifying than any sound. The hominids stand paralyzed for a heartbeat, the ancient instinct to freeze, warring with the new imperative to run. The stalemate breaks with a sudden explosion of dust. The cat launches itself forward, covering the ground in bounding, muscle-coiled leaps. The troop scatters their bipedal waddle, abandoning all pretense of efficiency for pure frantic panic. They cannot outrun this predator. Their legs are too short, their stride too slow. Their only hope is the one advantage they have brought from their past life. Up the instinct screams. Go up. But there are no forests here, only a solitary gnarled acacia tree standing alone in the clearing, its branches adorned with 3-inch thorns sharp enough to puncture leather. They scramble toward the tree, the cat closing the distance with mathematical certainty. The rear guard, a young male, feels the rush of air as the predator's claws swipe inches from his heel. He leaps for the lowest branch, his hands grasping the rough bark, ignoring the thorns that drive deep into his palms. He hauls himself up his feet, scrabbling for purchase, kicking dust into the face of the beast below. One by one, they pull themselves into the thorny crown of the acacia, leaving tufts of fur and drops of blood on the barbs. The cat slams into the trunk, its claws raking the wood, its heavy body shaking the entire tree. The predator paces the base of the tree, looking up with a cold, unsatisfied hunger. It rears up, swiping at the dangling feet of the hominids, snapping its jaws with a sound like a trap closing. The hominids climb higher, pressing themselves into the thin, precarious canopy of the acacia. They are safe, but they are trapped. The tree, once their home, is now their prison. They cling to the branches, their hearts hammering against their ribs like trapped birds looking down at the death that circles below. The sun beats down on them, the thorns bite into their flesh, and the reality of their new world settles in. They are refugees in a land of giants, surviving only by the grace of a few feet of vertical elevation. The diet of the ground has lured them out, but the ground itself has rejected them. As the adrenaline fades, the pain of their torn hands and the gnawing emptiness of their stomachs return. They watch the cats settle into the shade of their tree waiting. It knows they cannot stay up there forever. Thirst will eventually drive them down. This is the standoff of the Pliocene, the endurance of the walker versus the patience of the killer. The sun begins its descent, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. The temperature begins to drop, the heat radiating off the ground in shimmering waves. The hominids huddle together in the crotch of the tree branches, picking the thorns from each other's skin. They share the few seeds and roots they manage to carry in their hands, a meager meal that does little to quell the hunger. The matriarch looks out across the savannah, now bathed in the copper light of dusk. The landscape is beautiful, vast, and utterly indifferent to their suffering. To survive this night, they must do more than just hide. They must endure. They must override the panic and the pain. The transition to the ground has not made them masters. It has made them prey. But in this crucible of fear, something is hardening within them. They are learning the rhythms of the open land, the timing of the predators, and the geography of escape. They are no longer just apes who fell from the trees. They are the survivors of the descent. The night wind rises, rattling the thorns as the stars begin to emerge over a world that has become a battlefield. The dry season descends upon the Rift Valley like a hammer, shattering the fragile truce between life and the elements. The sun, now a white-hot tyrant, bleaches the color from the world, turning the golden savanna into a landscape of ash and dust. The waterholes shrink into cracked mud pans, trapping the weak in their viscous grip, while the air shimmers with a heat so intense it warps the horizon. The vegetation which sustained the troop through the transition has withered into brittle straw, devoid of moisture or nutrition. The garden is not just closed, it has been incinerated. In this furnace, the caloric equation shifts radically. The energy required to digest fibrous dead grass exceeds the energy it provides. To continue eating plants is to starve with a full stomach. Hunger is no longer a temporary discomfort. It is a permanent state of being a dull ache that sharpens the senses and erodes the fear response. The troop moves like ghosts through the scrub, their ribs counting the days since their last substantial meal. They are gaunt, their fur dull and patchy, their eyes sunken into their skulls. The survival of the species now hinges on a terrifying pivot. They must abandon the vegetarian legacy of their primate ancestors and look toward the one source of energy that remains abundant. They must enter the red world, the violent competitive arena of animal protein. But they possess no claws to rend flesh, no fangs to puncture jugulars, and no speed to run down prey. They are not hunters. They are opportunists, watchers, and thieves. The sky becomes their map, and the vultures are their guides. High above in the thermal currents, black specks spiral in a tightening vortex, marking the location of a kill like smoke from a signal fire. The matriarch watches the aerial dance, her brain connecting the vector of the birds with the distant smell of iron and rot. It is a sensory cue that triggers a new, dangerous migration. The troop changes direction, moving not away from the scent of predators but directly toward it. It is a violation of every survival instinct they possess. A desperate gamble that places them in the center of the slaughter. As they approach the kill site, the auditory landscape changes from the silence of the heat to the chaotic noise of consumption. The growls of feeding lions, the hysterical giggling of hyenas, and the snapping of bones drift on the wind. The smell hits them, a thick, cloying miasma of blood, bowels, and fermentation. It is a repulsive scent to a fruit eater, but to a starving organism it smells like salvation. They crest a small ridge and look down into the arena. A pride of large cats has brought down a massive herbivore, a prehistoric relative of the buffalo. The carcass is a frenzy of activity, a hierarchical dining table where death feeds life. The hominids crouch in the tall grass, invisible observers in a land of giants. They watch the lions feed their golden coats stained red, tearing huge strips of muscle from the bone. The troop knows they cannot challenge the kings. To step forward now is suicide. They must wait. This is the torture of the scavenger, the forced patience while the prize is devoured by others. They watch as the lions gorge themselves into a stupor and drag their heavy bellies to the shade. Now the second tier moves in the hyenas and jackals, the bone crushers and the scrappers. The noise intensifies a chaotic brawl for the scraps. The troops' target is not the meat, which is rapidly disappearing, but the bones. Specifically the long, thick limb bones that the cats have stripped but left intact. Inside those calcified vaults lies the marrow, a dense, high-fat treasure that is impervious to the beaks of vultures and the teeth of smaller predators. It is the most calorie-rich substance on the savannah, sealed away by evolution, waiting for a key. The hominids possess that key not in their jaws but in their hands. They grip rough, heavy stones, not shaped tools but natural cobbles selected for their weight and heft. These are the first external stomachs, the first hammers of a new era. The moment of action arrives, when the hyena pack is distracted by a skirmish over the ribcage. The matriarch signals with a sharp, guttural bark. The troop rises from the grass, not as a collection of individuals, but as a coordinated mob. They scream a high-pitched, terrifying cacophony designed to confuse and intimidate. They rush down the slope, hurling stones and waving branches, making themselves appear larger than they are. The scavengers at the carcass recoil, startled by this sudden bipedal invasion. For a few precious seconds, the element of surprise grants them the dominant position. This is the heist. There is no time to eat. There is only time to steal. The males rush the center, screaming at the jackals, while the females and younger members dive for the discarded limbs. The matriarch grabs a massive femur, slick with blood and saliva, heavy as a club. It is slippery, difficult to hold, but she clutches it to her chest with a strength born of desperation. Another grabs a humerus, another snatches a scrap of hide. The hyenas, recovering from their initial shock, realize the intruders are small and weak. They turn, lips curling back to reveal crushing molars, and the counterattack begins. Run. The command is unspoken but universal. The troop scatters, carrying their stolen prizes, fleeing back up the ridge. They do not look back. Behind them, the jaws of the hyenas snap on empty air, and the chase is abandoned quickly. The scavengers return to the sure thing of the carcass, rather than chase the thieves in the heat. The hominids run until their lungs burn, putting miles between themselves and the kill site. They retreat to a rocky outcrop, a defensible island in the sea of grass, where they can finally inspect their loot. They are safe, but they are trembling the adrenaline crash, leaving them weak and shaking. They gather in a circle, the heavy bones placed in the center like sacred totems. The smell of raw meat is overpowering, triggering a salivary response that hurts. But they cannot bite through the bone. The matriarch picks up her stone, a jagged chunk of lava rock. She positions the femur on a larger flat stone, the anvil. She raises the hammerstone high above her head. This motion, the overhead strike, is a mechanical innovation. It uses gravity and leverage to deliver force far exceeding the power of muscle alone. She brings the stone down. Crack. The sound is sharp, unnatural, ringing across the stones. The bone fractures, splitting longitudinally to reveal the prize inside the marrow. It is pink, fatty and gelatinous. She scoops it out with a finger, the texture soft and oily. She puts it in her mouth. The taste is explosive, pure, concentrated energy. It is fat, cholesterol and protein, the building blocks of the brain. She swallows and the energy seems to hit her bloodstream almost instantly. She hands the broken bone to her offspring, who lick the cavity clean with desperate tongues. The others follow suit, the sound of stone on bone echoing rhythmically, the first industrial noise of the planet. This consumption of marrow is the Promethean moment of biology. They are stealing fire from the gods of the food chain. This high-quality diet allows them to bypass the long, energy-intensive digestion required for plants. It frees up metabolic energy that will over generations be redirected from the gut to the brain. They are eating the fuel of the future. The fat coats their throats, soothing the dryness, filling the hollows of their hunger. For the first time in weeks, the gnawing pain in their bellies subsides, replaced by a warm, heavy satiety. But this new diet comes with a psychological cost. They have tasted blood. They have entered the Predator's Guild, however marginally. They are no longer innocent browsers of the forest. They are active participants in the violence of the savannah. The grease on their hands and faces marks them. As they sit in the fading light, licking the last of the grease from their fingers, their eyes are different. There is a new intensity, a predatory focus. They look at the horizon not just as a space to traverse, but as a hunting ground to exploit. The sun sets, painting the sky in bruises of purple and black.
When I hit it,
The temperature drops rapidly, the desert chill setting in. The troop huddles together, the warmth of the high-fat meal generating body heat that protects them from the cold. They sleep fitfully, their dreams haunted by the snapping jaws of hyenas and the rush of the raid. The stone tools lie scattered around them, silent witnesses to the transgression. They are merely rocks, yet they are the most dangerous objects on Earth. With these stones, the weak have found a way to break the world open and eat its secrets. The night is loud with the calls of the true hunters, the lions and the leopards patrolling their domains. But up on the rocky outcrop, the small defenseless bipeds survive another night. They have cheated death by stealing from its table. They are the scavengers, the bone breakers, the marrow eaters. And tomorrow, when the sun rises and the hunger returns, they will do it again. They will walk back into the valley of death, armed with stones and a desperate courage to claim their share of the red world. The euphoria of the marrow feast is a fleeting memory burned away by the relentless rising of the sun. The scavenged bones are now bleached white, stripped of every organic molecule left to crack in the heat. The troop cannot rely on the serendipity of a predator's kill every day. Such windfalls are rare accidents in a system designed to starve them. The reality of their existence returns to the baseline of the Pliocene dry season, a grinding, monotonous battle against a landscape that refuses to yield its energy. The meat is gone, the fruit is gone, and the easy sugars of the canopy are a distant dream. Now they must turn to the earth itself. They stand amidst a vast, undulating plain of withered sedges and hard-packed soil, a terrain that appears dead to the untrained eye. But survival here requires a shift in vision, a realization that the life of the plant has retreated underground. To survive the drought, the flora has pulled its resources into the root systems, locking carbohydrates and moisture into dense, fibrous knots beneath the surface. These are the fallback foods, the underground storage organs, tough tubers, rhizomes and corms that act as the survival batteries of the plant kingdom. They are hidden, defended by layers of hard earth, and encased in protective toxic skins. The troop fans out across the dry scrub, their heads bowed, scanning the ground for the subtle withered stalks that mark the location of a buried treasure. They are not hunting, they are mining. A female pauses by a patch of dry vine, recognizing the leaf shape from the collective memory of the group. She drops to her knees, not to rest, but to work. In her hand, she holds a tool, but it is not the heavy stone hammer of the bone breakers. It is a simple stick, a branch stripped of leaves and broken to a point. This is the digging stick, the lever that will open the vaults of the underworld. She drives the point into the baked clay, putting her shoulder weight behind it, grunting with the effort. The ground is like concrete, resisting every inch, vibrating the shock up her arm. She pries, loosening a clod of earth, then digs with her hands, her fingernails wearing down to the quick. Dust coats her face, clogging her pores and matting her fur. This is the caloric calculus of the fallback diet, high energy expenditure for a low quality return. She is trading the precious glycogen in her muscles for a chance at a dirty, fibrous root. It is a gamble of attrition. After minutes of intense labor, she strikes the object. She pulls it free, a tuber the size of a human fist covered in grit and hair-like roots. It is ugly, misshapen, and hard as wood. There is no sweet aroma, only the smell of damp earth and starch. She wipes it on her leg, removing the worst of the dirt, but the grit remains embedded in the skin. She does not peel it. She lacks the knife-sharp claws or the tools for delicate surgery. She places it between her back teeth, the molars, and bites down. The sound is a loud, dry crunch, the sound of geology meeting biology. This diet demands a radical transformation of the anatomy. The gracile, fruit-slicing jaws of their ancestors are insufficient here. Evolution is slowly sculpting their faces into heavy-duty crushing machines. Their enamel has thickened, becoming a shield against the abrasive sand and silica found in the roots. Their jaw muscles, the temporalis and masseter, are enlarging, requiring stronger anchor points on the skull. They are becoming grinders, living millstones capable of pulverizing tough cellulose fibers to extract the meager nutrients locked inside. Every meal is a physical workout for the skull, a rhythmic, repetitive chewing that lasts for hours. The taste is bitter and bland, a mouthful of dry fiber that sucks the moisture from the tongue. The tuber is rich in starch, but low in sugar. A slow-burning fuel that keeps them alive, but rarely satisfied. Digestion becomes a heavy bloating process. Their guts must work overtime to ferment this fibrous material, creating gas and distension. They spend the heat of the day in the shade, not sleeping but chewing and digesting, their bellies swollen, their energy levels flat. They are surviving, but they are not thriving. They are existing on the margins of viability, held in place by the stubbornness of their biology. When the roots are scarce, they turn to the insect world. A termite mound rises from the plain like a fortress of red clay baked to the hardness of stone. Inside, millions of protein-rich insects live in the dark. The hominids cannot break the walls, but they can pick the locks. A young male finds a ventilation shaft and inserts a thin, flexible grass stem. He waits, his body still feeling the vibrations of the colony. He withdraws the stem carefully. It is covered in soldier termites, their jaws clamped onto the intruder. He passes the stem through his lips, stripping the insects. It is a burst of acid and fat, a tiny sharp snack that supplements the grinding dullness of the roots. But the greatest enemy is not hunger, it is thirst. The dry season has advanced to its peak, and the landscape is parched. The waterholes they visited weeks ago have turned into cracked puzzles of dried mud. The air sucks moisture from their bodies with every breath. Their skin loses its elasticity, their eyes become rheumy and dry. Dehydration brings a creeping lethargy, a fog that slows the mind and makes the limbs feel like lead. The troop moves slower now, their range restricted by the need to return to the dwindling sources of water. The tether of hydration is tightening around their necks. They walk along the spine of a dried riverbed, a ghost river of sand and polished stones. The memory of water is written in the landscape, in the smooth curves of the rocks and the undercut banks, but the liquid itself has vanished. The heat radiating from the stones is punishing, baking them from below as the sun cooks them from above. The matriarch stops sniffing the air. There is no scent of water, only the dust. But she looks at the vegetation on the banks. There, among the dead grass, is a patch of sansevieria and deep-rooted sedges that remain inexplicably green. She descends into the deepest part of the channel, where the sand is slightly darker. She drops to her knees and begins to dig. The others watch, their tongues swollen, their hope fragile. She digs frantically, throwing sand behind her, creating a conical pit. The deeper she goes, the cooler the sand becomes. It changes color from white to gray, then to a damp, dark brown. The smell of wet earth rises, a scent more intoxicating than blood or fruit. It is the smell of life. She reaches down her hand, disappearing into the hole, and scoops up a handful of wet sand. She squeezes the sand into her mouth, sucking the dirty moisture from the grit. It is not a flowing spring, but it is enough. The water table is lurking just inches below the surface, hidden from the sun but accessible to the digger. The troop crowds around, pushing and shoving in their desperation. They enlarge the hole, digging side by side, until a small pool of muddy water seeps into the bottom. They lower their faces to the earth, lapping up the brown liquid, ignoring the grit that grinds between their teeth. This is the secret water, the reserve of the deep earth. Alongside the water, they find the prize of the riverbed, giant tubers swollen with water and starch, protected by the cool sand. These are not the dry, woody roots of the scrub. These are succulent, crisp, and full of hydration. They pull them from the mud, washing them in the seep, and bite into them. The crunch is wet and satisfying. Water runs down their chins, washing away the dust. This moment, kneeling in the mud of a dead river, is a victory against the climate. They have outsmarted the drought. They have used their tools and their knowledge to extract water from a stone. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows down the length of the dry river. The troop remains in the channel, sated and hydrated for the first time in days. They are covered in mud, their nails broken, their jaws aching from the chewing, but they are alive. The grinding earth tried to wear them down, to erase them from the landscape, but they proved to be harder than the soil. They are the persistent foragers, the ones who refuse to accept the surface reality. They know that the world has layers, and that survival belongs to those who are willing to dig. As night falls, the temperature in the riverbed drops the sand, retaining the day's warmth. They curl up together in the depression. They have dug a nest made of the earth itself. Above them, the stars wheel across the sky, indifferent and cold. The hominids sleep with the heaviness of exhaustion, their bellies working on the fibrous meal. They are not the masters of this world. That title belongs to the lions and the storms, but they are its most stubborn tenants. They have survived the fall from the trees, the terror of the grass, and the starvation of the drought. They are ready for the final turn of the wheel. The change begins not with a sound, but with a smell. a scent so ancient and profound that it is encoded in the very DNA of the biosphere. It is the smell of petrichor, the aroma of dry, oxidized soil, releasing its chemical secrets as the first heavy drops of moisture hit the dust. The wind shifts, no longer carrying the grit of the desert, but the cool electric charge of the coming monsoon. High above the Rift Valley, the charcoal clouds stack up like mountains, bruising the sky with shades of indigo and violet. The sun, which has tyrannized the landscape for months, is finally blotted out, surrendered to the mercy of the shadow. Then the sky breaks. The rain does not fall. It collapses. It is a vertical ocean poured onto a thirsty world, a deluge that washes away the footprints of the starvation months. The dry riverbeds where the troop once dug for muddy seeps instantly transform into roaring torrents of brown water, carving new arteries into the land. The cracks in the clay seal shut as the earth swells, drinking greedily. The temperature plummets, and for the first time in an eternity, the hominids shiver not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming wetness of the renewal. They huddle under the rocky overhangs, watching the curtain of water reshape their reality. The response of the land is immediate and miraculous. Within 48 hours, the brown skeletal world erupts into a violent shade of green. The dormancy of the flora is broken, and shoots push through the mud with explosive speed. The savanna is no longer a graveyard of dry straw. It is a salad bowl of fresh, nutrient-dense grasses, herbs, and flowering plants. The cycle of starvation is over. The troop emerges from their shelters into a world that has been washed clean. The air is thick with the buzzing of insects and the calls of birds returning to nest. With the return of the lush vegetation comes the return of the herds. The wildebeest, the gazelles, and the ancient elephants migrate back into the valley following the scent of the new grass. The landscape is suddenly crowded with calories. For the hominids, the survival diet shifts once again, moving from the desperate extraction of the bad times to the selective abundance of the good. They feast on the fresh shoots of the grasses, which are now soft and sugary, requiring none of the grinding effort of the dry season. They find bird eggs in the low scrub, sucking down the rich yolk, and catch slow-moving amphibians in the puddles. But they are not the same animals that descended from the trees in the first chapter of this saga. The crucible of the dry season, the bone-breaking and the root-digging has changed them physically and mentally. They have survived the bottleneck. Those who could not adapt, who could not switch from fruit to meat to tuber, are gone, their lineages extinguished in the silence of the drought. The survivors are the flexible, the generalists, the ones who view the entire world as a menu. They have developed a cognitive map of diet that is unprecedented in the animal kingdom, a mental library that includes the locations of tubers, the flight paths of vultures, and the ripening cycles of fruit. This season of plenty allows for a profound shift in their social structure. In the times of scarcity, every individual was locked in a private battle for calories driven by the selfish gene of survival. Now, with the pressure lifted, the energy surplus is directed toward the group. They gather at a central location, a home base near a freshwater spring, not just to sleep, but to interact. They bring food back to this center, a behavior that is radically different from the feed-as-you-go strategy of their primate cousins. A male brings a scavenged haunch of meat. A female brings a pile of washed tubers. The act of sharing food becomes the glue of their society. It is the physical manifestation of trust and investment. When a mother shares a high-fat piece of marrow with her offspring, she is not just feeding a mouth, she is fueling a brain. The expensive tissue of the developing neocortex requires massive amounts of energy that can only be supplied by this rich, varied diet. The childhood of the hominid is extending their offspring, remaining dependent for longer periods. This is not a weakness, it is a strategy. It buys time for the brain to grow, to learn the complex social rules and the technical skills of the tool and the landscape. In the cool of the late afternoon, the troop engages in grooming, the rhythmic picking of fur that releases oxytocin and cements the bonds of alliance. They are a mosaic of ages, the scarred elders who remember the old forests, the strong adults who conquered the savannah, and the wide-eyed infants who have known only the ground. They communicate with a complex system of grunts, gestures and touches, a proto-language of emotion and intent. They are not yet speaking, but they are understanding each other with a depth that transcends the simple signaling of animals. They are becoming a collective mind. The narrator pulls back to view them from the perspective of deep time. These creatures, standing less than 4 feet tall, naked and defenseless, are the most dangerous things on the planet, though they do not know it yet. They have solved the fundamental problem of biology, how to extract energy from any environment. They can eat the sun via the fruit, the earth via the root, and the animal via the marrow. They are the ultimate biological converters. The lions have their teeth, the gazelles have their speed, but the hominids have their hunger in their hands. The sun begins to set over the revitalized Rift Valley, casting a golden light that illuminates the dust motes dancing in the air. The matriarch stands on a high ridge, looking out over the vast green expanse that stretches to the horizon. She does not look back at the dark line of the distant jungle. That world is gone, a memory fading in the mists of the past. Her eyes are fixed on the open spaces, the endless grasslands that invite movement and exploration. The fear of the ground has been replaced by a curiosity about what lies beyond the edge of the visible world. She signals to the group. It is time to move, not because they are starving, but because they can. They are no longer tethered to a specific grove of trees or a specific waterhole. They carry their survival kit in their minds and in their hands. They can go anywhere. They descend the ridge, walking with a confident, striding gait that has become efficient and tireless. The wobble is gone. The arch of the foot acts as a spring. The gluteal muscles fire with precision, propelling them forward into the future. They walk in a single file, leaving a trail of deep footprints in the fresh volcanic ash and mud. These tracks will harden, bake in the sun, and be buried by the layers of time waiting to be uncovered millions of years later as the definitive proof of their passage. They are walking away from the Pliocene and into the Pleistocene, into the coming ages of ice and fire. They are walking toward the conquest of the globe. The wind blows through the grass, whispering the secrets of the aeons. The struggle is far from over. There will be colder winters, fiercer predators, and darker nights. But the fundamental question has been answered. Can they survive? Yes. They have eaten the world, and in doing so they have become its masters. The survival diet was not just a means to stay alive. It was the forge that hammered out the human soul. The sun dips below the horizon, and the stars ignite the sky, the same stars that will guide their descendants across oceans and into the void of space. But for now, they are just a small band of families huddled together in the tall grass, listening to the heartbeat of Africa. They breathe in the cool air alive, enduring and ready for whatever the morning brings. The story of the ape is over. The story of the human has begun.
Look at the marrow.
So much food today.
Yes, eat, eat.
The arch of the foot acts as a natural spring, propelling our ancestors across the wet savanna with remarkable efficiency. The rains brought life back to the savanna. As the storms clear, the true spectacle of the Paleolithic night emerges.